Hello, and I'm just going to get the microphone so you can actually hear me properly. Sorry, I did think of that before, but then I had to try and figure something else out, which I'm very pleased to say actually appears to have worked, and that is that there is an automatic announcement on my Discord server when I go live on Twitch. There you go, technology doing what it's supposed to do, I think. And please block your ears if it's going to get too loud, I'm not sure, just because I'm thumping around with the microphone. There we go. How are you? I hope you're well. I hope you're safe. I hope you're in a good... I'm just looking at the, puzzled look on my face because I was looking across at my other monitor, which is still sitting on top of the computer, which is on the floor. Yeah, because there's a lot of other stuff that I do with my days. Product photography for our home-based business, making applications for registration, for acknowledgement that we are a New Zealand business, so that we can actually have that information on our products, all sorts of things. So it does keep me busy. I've done a little bit more product photography of the urns that I do, that we do. I did the photography. Having to edit them, being really disappointed when I discovered that the replacement photos I took for one of the urns are as much out of focus as the previous ones were. So I'm going to have to go and do that one again. Anyway, just open up Twitch on my phone and make sure that it is on silent. So it's not going to be talking to us in the background and confusing everybody. Because that's happened before. Not that it's hard to confuse us. Yes, so that's why I haven't got my proper desk setup done yet. Getting there. Do you like the tiara and the little line of butterflies? Formal Friday, just an acknowledgement of Formal Friday, as in, because I'm based at home anyway, but just the fact that we've still got things like COVID going on and things like that. And with a lot of people working from home, instead of having casual Friday, because every day is a casual day unless you're on a Zoom meeting and you have to wear something formal from sort of like chest height upwards. Apart from that, it's quite nice to have an excuse to look a little bit more glam. And I don't have any glamorous clothes, and so therefore it's the mini tiara and the butterflies. And I'm just going to tilt my camera ever so slightly more. There you go. I think that's better. Yeah. It's not so much whether or not it cuts off the top of the tiara, it's more that there's room for the captions over on the other browser, on the main display that everybody else gets to see. And did you know that if you're watching on Twitch, you can turn off the captions? If you hover your mouse, this is assuming you're doing it on a computer, not on a mobile, you hover your mouse arrow over the video window and it should have a little wee button on the right hand side, my right hand side, over on this side of the screen for you. It's probably about thumbnail size and it probably says CC for closed captions, and if you click on that you can then make some adjustments as to how they look for you rather than just the standard look that I've got on them. Anyway, enough of all of that sort of stuff. That's already nearly 5 minutes gone. Hi, if you're new here, hi, I'm Jev. I live in New Zealand and I read old-fashioned children's stories because they're fun. Why not? And people don't get to hear them anymore because they're old-fashioned, and so therefore they've gone out of fashion, and everybody is reading much more modern new stuff. There's nothing wrong with the new stuff, but there's lots of it and the old ones get overlooked. So it's quite nice to actually have some old stories to catch up with and feel like we're part of a different place and time. It's also really good for stretching your brain and your perception of how the world functions, not just now in the place that you are, but what it's like for other people in other places, but also in other times, different time periods. We make assumptions about things that we haven't experienced ourselves. And often if you read a story or several stories that are set in a particular time period, if they are accurate to the time period they're set in, this is if it's kind of historically based, you'll actually find that you have a much broader understanding of that period than you originally had. It's really easy to make assumptions. The Victorians thought that everyone before them was filthy dirty all the time because they didn't see evidence of the sort of baths or whatever cleaning setup that they had themselves, and so they assessed that everybody else before them was just filthy, stinky, dirty, and died super early, because obviously you get lots of germs and you die from that sort of thing, although the Victorians didn't actually understand germs, so just ignore that last part. But yes, by reading about stuff that's set in a different time period to where you are now, especially if it was written in the time period that you're reading about, you will gain a much more accurate understanding and feel of what life was like for other people in different times. We've had 2 books that specifically tried to open up the understanding of young English children specifically by the stories, and that were the 2 Rudyard Kipling books, Puck of Pook's Hill and Rewards and Fairies. Sorry, I should have explained. I have ADHD, and also I'm on the autism spectrum, so I tend to get distracted quite easily. Right in the middle of something, I can lose what the words are for it. And just as a completely irrelevant thing, but also to do with at the moment, there's a lot of noise of the wind in the chimney next to me, and I'm hoping it's not going to be too much for the microphone for you listening to the stories. But there's not a lot I can do about it. Anyway, how about we read our story? We'll start with the tips that I usually give everybody, not always, but usually. Get yourself something to drink. I've got water. Water's great for keeping you hydrated because your body can absorb it fairly quickly. Something to snack on. I've got some little Dutch spice biscuits and somewhere comfortable to sit. And I love it if people are lurking, because it means that they can listen and enjoy the stories even if they aren't actually interacting in the chat. You're most welcome to lurk. Lurkers are welcome here. And if you want me to know that you're here and lurking, then hit the exclamation mark key on your keyboard and then type lurk, L-U-R-K, and it will pop up with a little message saying that you are lurking, and probably something else like, I appreciate the fact that you let me know. I can't remember. It's been a while since I set it up, sorry. I'm not saying you have to tell me that you're here if you are staying silent, but if you would like me to know that you're here but not actually engaging in chat, then you're most welcome to do that. So how about we read? Yeah, good idea. We are currently reading The Phoenix and the Carpet by E. Nesbit. That's Edith Nesbit. And we are up to chapter 4, which is called 2 Bazaars. Now, the chapters are fairly long, so I'll probably only read 1 chapter today. We'll see how we go. Chapter 4, 2 Bazaars. Mother was really a great dear. She was pretty and she was loving and most frightfully good when you were ill, and always kind and almost always just. That is, she was just when she understood things, but of course she did not always understand things. No one understands everything, and mothers are not angels, though a good many of them come pretty near it. The children knew that Mother always wanted to do what was best for them, even if she was not clever enough to know exactly what was the best. That was why all of them, but much more particularly Anthea, felt rather uncomfortable at keeping the great secret from her of the wishing carpet and the phoenix. There you go. And Anthea, whose inside mind was made so that she was able to be much more uncomfortable than the others, had decided that she must tell her mother the truth, however little likely it was that her mother would believe it. Then I shall have done what's right, she said to the phoenix, and if she doesn't believe me, it won't be my fault, will it? Not in the least, said the golden bird, and she won't, so you're quite safe. Anthea chose a time when she was doing her home lessons. They were algebra and Latin, German, English, and Euclid, and she asked her mother whether she might come and do them in the drawing room so as to be quiet, she said to her mother, and to herself she said, and that's not the real reason. I hope I shan't grow up a liar. So that's quite extensive studies for a girl. in the time period that this is set. Algebra, Latin, German, English, and Euclid. Euclid was a logistician, I think, or a philosopher. Greek, I think. I don't know. I didn't do this sort of studies when I was at school. So what they call home lessons are probably what we would call homework. I'm just going to look to see if there's a picture that I'm supposed to be showing you, so don't disappear. Oh, and I have put the story pictures we've already had so far that are relevant for the current where we've read up to over in our Discord server. If you want to join our Discord server and have a look, you're most welcome to. So I shall carry on reading the story. I hope I shan't grow up a liar, Mother said. Of course, dearie. And Anthea started swimming through a sea of X's and Y's and Z's. That's algebra. I remember that much. I did do algebra at school and English. What were the other ones? Didn't do Latin, didn't do German, and didn't do Euclid, obviously. Otherwise I'd know what that was about. Mother was sitting at the mahogany bureau writing letters. Mother dear, said Anthea. Yes, love a duck, said Mother. About Cook, said Anthea. I know where she is. Do you, dear? Said Mother. Well, I wouldn't take her back after the way she has behaved. It's not her fault, said Anthea. May I tell you about it from the beginning? Mother laid down her pen, and her nice face had a resigned expression. As you know, a resigned expression always makes you want not to tell anybody anything. It's like this, said Anthea in a hurry. That egg, you know, that came in the carpet. We put it in the fire and it hatched into a phoenix. And the carpet was a wishing carpet and... A very nice game, darling, said Mother, taking up her pen. Now do be quiet. I've got a lot of letters to write. I'm going to Bournemouth tomorrow with the lamb, and there's that bazaar. So don't forget, the lamb is their youngest sibling, a little boy. Kind of toddler, able to talk, but not particularly well. Anyway, and a bazaar is kind of like a sale, and yet also a fair or a fete or a gala day. Depending on where you are, it's kind of a mixed up version of all of those things. In this context, I think we'll find that there's a different sort of bazaar in the rest of the story because it said 2 bazaars. We'll find out. Anthea went back to XYZ and Mother's pen scratched busily. But Mother, said Anthea when Mother put down the pen to lick an envelope, the carpet takes us wherever we like and... I wish it would take you where you could get a few nice Eastern things for my bazaar, said Mother. I promised them and I've no time to go to Liberty's now. So Liberty's was a shop that sold all sorts of things. One of the things they're famous for is their fabrics with print patterns on them. I have some curtains that are Liberty curtains. They were actually made out of fabric from the Liberty shop. Very intricate, busy pattern of flowers. I don't think there's any birds or anything else like that on it, but the colours are really, really neatly done. Very much the English arts and crafts movement styling of things that they did. I'm not sure, but that may have been what they originally set up as being a place that sold that sort of stuff. But they sold a lot of other things too. They're not just fabrics, as you can see here, because Mother is talking about not having been able to go and get things from Liberty's for the bazaar. Anyway, it shall, said Mother, it shall, as in the carpet will take them somewhere, said Anthea, but Mother, well, dear, said Mother a little impatiently, for she had taken up her pen again. The carpet took us to a place where you couldn't have whooping cough, and the lamb hasn't hooped since, whooping cough. And we took Cook because she was so tiresome, and then she would stay and be queen of the savages. They thought her cap was a crown, and, darling one, said Mother, you know I love to hear the things you make up, but I am most awfully busy. But it's true, said Anthea desperately. You shouldn't say that, my sweet, said Mother gently, and then Anthea knew it was hopeless. Are you going away for long? Asked Anthea. I've got a cold, said Mother, and Daddy's anxious about it and the lamb's cough. He hasn't coughed since Saturday, the lamb's eldest sister interrupted. I wish I could think so, Mother replied, and Daddy's got to go to Scotland. I do hope you'll be good children. We will, said Anthea fervently. When's the bazaar? On Saturday, said Mother, at the schools. Oh, don't talk any more, there's a treasure. My head's going round and I've forgotten how to spell whooping cough. Mother and the lamb went away, and Father went away, and there was a new cook who looked so like a frightened rabbit that no one had the heart to do anything to frighten her any more than seemed natural to her. The phoenix begged to be excused. It said it wanted a week's rest and asked that it might not be disturbed, and it hid its golden gleaming self, and nobody could find it. So that when Wednesday afternoon brought an unexpected holiday and everyone decided to go somewhere on the carpet, the journey had to be undertaken without the phoenix. They were debarred from any carpet excursions in the evening by a sudden promise to Mother, exacted in the agitation of parting, that they would not be out after 6 at night except on Saturday, when they were to go to the bazaar and were pledged to put on their best clothes, to wash themselves to the utmost, and to clean their nails, not with scissors, which are scratchy and bad, but with flat sharpened ends of wooden matches, which do no harm to anyone's nails. So that's to get out the dirt that was embedded under the tips of their fingers, probably because they've been children doing things, digging around in the dirt and so on, and not really aware of or thinking of what that sort of thing looks like. Let's go and see the lamb, said Jane. But everyone agreed that if they appeared suddenly in Bournemouth, it would frighten Mother out of her wits, if not into a fit. So they sat on the carpet and thought and thought and thought, till they almost began to squint. Look here, said Cyril. I know. Please, carpet, take us somewhere where we can see the lamb and Mother, and no one can see us. Except the lamb, said Jane quickly, and the next moment they found themselves recovering from the upside-down movement, and there they were sitting on the carpet, and the carpet was laid out over another thick, soft carpet of brown pine needles. There were green pine trees overhead, and a swift, clear little stream was running as fast as ever it could between steep banks, and there, sitting on the pine needle carpet, was Mother without her hat, and the sun was shining brightly, although it was November, and there was the lamb as jolly, and not whooping at all. The carpet's deceived us, said Robert gloomily. Mother will see us directly she turns her head. But the faithful carpet had not deceived them. Mother turned her dear head and looked straight at them and did not see them. We're invisible, Cyril whispered. What awful larks! But to the girls, it was not larks at all. It was horrible to have Mother looking straight at them, and her face kept keeping the same, just as though they weren't there. I don't like it, said Jane. Mother never looked at us like that before, just as if she didn't love us, as if we were somebody else's children, and not very nice ones either, as if she didn't care whether she saw us or not. It is horrid, said Anthea, almost in tears. But at this moment the lamb saw them and plunged towards the carpet, shrieking, Panty own Panty, and Pussy and Squiggle and Bobs, oh, oh. So that's the lamb's nicknames for them. Panty is Anthea, Pussy is Jane, Squiggle is Cyril, that's one of his nicknames, and Bobs is Robert, in case you're wondering. Anthea caught him and kissed him. So did Jane. They could not help it. He looked such a darling with his blue three-cornered hat all on one side and his precious face all dirty, quite in the old familiar way. I love you, Panty. I love you, and you, and you, and you, cried the lamb. It was a delicious moment. Even the boys thumped their baby brother joyously on the back. Then Anthea glanced at Mother, and Mother's face was a pale sea-green colour, and she was staring at the lamb as if she thought he had gone mad. And indeed, that was exactly what she did think. My lamb, my precious, come to Mother, she cried, and jumped up and ran to the baby. She was so quick that the invisible children had to leap back, or she would have felt them, and to feel what you can't see is the worst sort of ghost feeling. Mother picked up the lamb and hurried away from the pine wood. Let's go home, said Jane after a miserable silence. It feels just exactly as if Mother didn't love us. but they couldn't bear to go home till they had seen Mother meet another lady and knew that she was safe. You cannot leave your mother to go green in the face in a distant pine wood, far from all human aid, and then go home on your wishing carpet as though nothing had happened. When Mother seemed safe, the children returned to the carpet and said, "Home," and home they went. "I don't care about being invisible myself," said Cyril, "at least not with my own family. It would be different if you were a prince or a bandit or a burglar." And now the thoughts of all four dwelt fondly on the dear, greenish face of Mother. "I wish she hadn't gone away," said Jane. "The house is simply beastly without her." "I think we ought to do what she said," said Anthea. "I saw something in a book the other day about the wishes of the departed being sacred." "That means when they've departed further off," said Cyril. "India's coral or Greenland's icy. Don't you know? Not Bournemouth. Besides, we don't know what her wishes are. She said," Anthea was very much inclined to cry, "she said, 'Get Indian things for my bazaar.' But I knew she thought we couldn't, and it was only play." "Let's get them all the same," said Robert. "We'll go first thing on Saturday morning." And on Saturday morning, the first thing, they went. That's a relief. I was worried that they were going to go off right then, because they only get 3 wishes each day, and they've already had 2 because they went to where Mother and the lamb were, and then they came home, which would have left only 1 more, which meant that they wouldn't have been able to get home, because they've done some silly things before with their wishes. So let's see how we go with this one. "We'll go first thing on Saturday morning." And on Saturday morning, the first thing, they went. There was no finding the phoenix, so they sat on the beautiful wishing carpet and said, "We want Indian things for Mother's bazaar. Will you please take us where people will give us heaps of Indian things?" That's sensible. Give, not expect to buy. The docile carpet swirled their senses away and restored them on the outskirts of a gleaming white Indian town. They knew it was Indian at once by the shape of the domes and roofs, and besides, a man went by on an elephant. And 2 English soldiers went along the road talking like in Mr. Kipling's books. So after that, no one could have any doubt as to where they were. At the time of this writing, India was still part of the British Empire. So that's why they had English soldiers walking along the road. So there you go. Just in case you're puzzled by that. Sorry, I'll try and sit in such a way that doesn't look like I'm falling over. I'm not actually. I'm sitting straight, but I'm sitting slightly at an angle to the camera because it's a little easier for looking at the book. It was very... No. They rolled up the carpet and Robert carried it, and they walked boldly into the town. It was very warm, and once more they had to take off their London in November coats, because it's obviously November in London where they live, and so they're dressed for that weather, and carry them on their arms. The streets were narrow and strange, and the clothes of the people in the streets were stranger, and the talk of the people was strangest of all. "I can't understand a word," said Cyril. "How on earth are we to ask for things for our bazaar?" "And they're poor people too," said Jane. "I'm sure they are. What we want is a Rajah or something." Robert began unrolling the carpet, but the others stopped him, imploring him not to waste a wish. "We asked the carpet to take us where we could get Indian things for bazaars," said Anthea, "and it will." Her faith was justified. Just as she finished speaking, a very brown gentleman in a turban came up to them and bowed deeply. He spoke, and they thrilled to the sound of English words. "My Rani, she think you very nice childs. She asks, do you lose yourselves, and do you desire to sell carpet? She see you from her palki. You come see her, yes?" And I'm not sure what some of those words referenced, Rani and palki, and if that's even how they're said. We'll just have to put up with it. And apologies in advance for the accent. Well, actually, it's retro for that 1 sentence, but 2 sentences, 3 sentences, 4 sentences. Apologies in retro for the 4 sentences I've already said with a terrible accent. There will be more, so I'm apologising in advance for those ones. They followed the stranger, who seemed to have a great many more teeth in his smile than are usual, and he led them through crooked streets to the Rani's palace. Maybe someone can look up the word Ranee, Ranee, and find out what it means. I'm not going to describe the Ranee's palace because I really have never seen the palace of a Ranee, and Mr. Kipling has, so you can read about it in his books. But I know exactly what happened there. The old Ranee sat on a low cushioned seat, and there were a lot of other ladies with her, all in trousers and veils and sparkling with tinsel and gold and jewels, and the brown turbaned gentleman stood behind a sort of carved screen and interpreted what the children said and what the Queen said. And when the Queen asked to buy the carpet, the children said no. Why? Asked the Ranee, and Jane briefly said why, and the interpreter interpreted. The Queen spoke, and then the interpreter said, "My mistress says it is a good story, and you tell it all through without thought of time." And they had to. It made a long story, especially as it had all to be told twice. Oh, as in they're under instruction to tell the story properly. Right, okay. It had to be told twice, once by Cyril and once by the interpreter. Cyril rather enjoyed himself. He warmed to his work and told the tale of the phoenix and the carpet and the lone tower and the queen cook in language that grew insensibly more and more Arabian Nightsy. And the Ranee and her ladies listened to the interpreter and rolled about on their fat cushions with laughter. When the story was ended, she spoke, and the interpreter explained that she had said, "Little one, thou art a heaven-born teller of tales," and she threw him a string of turquoises from round her neck. "Oh, how lovely!" cried Jane and Anthea. Cyril bowed several times and then cleared his throat and said, "Thank her very, very much, but I would much rather she gave me some of the cheap things in the bazaar. Tell her I want them to sell again and give the money to buy clothes for poor people who haven't any." "Tell him he has my leave to sell my gift and clothe the naked with its price," said the Queen when this was translated. But Cyril said very firmly, "No, thank you. The things have got to be sold today at our bazaar, and no one would buy a turquoise necklace at an English bazaar. They'd think it was a sham, or else they'd want to know where we got it." So then the Queen sent out for little pretty things, and her servants piled the carpet with them. I think that's the cue for our picture. There you go. Oops, sorry, trying to get my chair out of the way. Her servants piled them on the carpet. And there's all sorts of bits and pieces. These are her servants. There's someone else coming into the room with some more stuff to put on this carpet here. "I must needs lend you an elephant to carry them away," she said, laughing. But Anthea said, "If the Queen will lend us a comb and let us wash our hands and faces, she shall see a magic thing. We and the carpet and all these brass trays and pots and carved things and stuffs and things will just vanish away like smoke." The Queen clapped her hands at this idea and lent the children a sandalwood comb inlaid with ivory lotus flowers. Just turn the picture off so I don't have to stay over to one side. And they washed their faces and hands in silver basins. Then Cyril made a very polite farewell speech, and quite suddenly he ended with the words, "And I wish we were at the bazaar at our schools." That's pretty clever. Sorry, I'm just going to get ready the next picture while we're here. I'm not quite sure what the next one is, but it looks like it's a different shape picture. And I wish we were at the bazaar at our schools. And of course they were. And the Queen and her ladies were left with their mouths open, gazing at the bare space on the inlaid marble floor where the carpet and the children had been. "That is magic, if ever magic was," said the Queen, delighted with the incident, which indeed has given the ladies of that court something to talk about on wet days ever since. It must get a little bit boring at times, just sitting around, filling in time, looking after each other. Sorry, I'm just checking this one over here, as I'm supposed to do, to make sure that everything's in order, which means there's nothing strange going on. And I'll carry on with the next section. Okay. Actually, I might also just pull up the folder where the pictures are, just because I don't want to miss a picture. They're lovely illustrations, and I don't want to miss any. So I'm just going to pull up the folder where they are so that we can... I talk funny when I'm trying to find something at the same time as reading or explaining something, so that we can see the pictures at the right time. How's that? That sounds pretty good to me. And there's the folder for the phoenix and the carpet. And let's just have a look at what the next picture is meant to be. Let's make them nice and extra large so I can see them without having to open them. That makes sense, doesn't it? Oh yes, there's one we've just had. And I'm pretty sure... Yes, very good. I know what we're up to now. Good, we're sorted. Which indeed had given the ladies of that court something to talk about on wet days ever since. Cyril's stories had taken quite some time, so had the meal of strange sweet foods that they had had while the little pretty things were being bought, and the gas in the schoolroom was already lighted. That means the lights were on because they used gas lights. Outside, the winter dusk was stealing down among the Camden town houses. "I'm glad we got washed in India," said Cyril. "We should have been awfully late if we'd had to go home and scrub." That was a very smart thing to do, was to ask if they could borrow a comb and something to wash in. It's my homemade iced coffee. Coffee from the coffee machine. About half a teaspoon of icing sugar because it dissolves fairly quickly and easily. Often I don't have any sugar in it. And then the rest is cold milk. Very nice. And I'm having it now because there won't be a chapter break for me to have a drink in, and I'll have a mouthful of my biscuit. "We should have been awfully late if we'd had to go home and scrub," said Cyril. "Besides," Robert said, "it's much warmer washing in India. I shouldn't mind it so much if we lived there." So obviously in November in England, they are washing with cold water from the pump or the tap or whatever they've got at that stage. It depends on where you were living as to what they had. That would have been cold water if that's what you're washing in. Unless you're having a bath, in which case they heat it for you. But otherwise, your normal washing, you're doing with cold water. Very cold. Right, carrying on. The thoughtful carpet had dumped the children down in a dusky space behind the point where the corners of two stalls met. The floor was littered with string and brown paper baskets. No, string and brown paper, and baskets and boxes were heaped along the wall. The children crept out under a stall covered with all sorts of table covers and mats and things embroidered beautifully by idle ladies with no real work to do. That was the thing, especially in the Victorian and the Edwardian era. You had a whole sector of society where women were not working, middle class and upper class women didn't work, working class women often did, but generally speaking, reasonably well-off women didn't work, and they had all this time on their hands. That's why in the Jane Austen style books you hear about the ladies doing needlework and playing on the pianoforte and things like this, and it's just because that was what they were given to do to keep themselves occupied, and it was considered that was ladylike. And so after this you had the Victorian era and then the Edwardian era, and there was still a little bit of that sort of a thing going on. Women didn't go off to university, they didn't go off and get jobs, and so it gets very boring if you're sitting there doing nothing. But if you are also of the inclination to try and help people who are not in as good a situation as yourself, in those days you would then do like these women are doing here. They would have a bazaar to sell things that they had made so that the money could go towards helping people who were not as well off as them, such as families where the father worked in a mine or a factory, had died or was ill, because they didn't have any sickness benefit or anything like that. And the mother was trying to feed everybody, pay the rent and this sort of stuff, but had no income. So what do you do? So hopefully there's somebody around who can help you like this. And there were people who did actually have that attitude towards helping others. Although people who were on the receiving end of it didn't always appreciate it because they felt like they were being looked down on, which nobody likes. Anyway, embroidered beautifully by idle ladies with no real work to do, they got out at the end, displacing a sideboard cloth adorned with a tasteful pattern of blue geraniums. The girls got out unobserved. So did Cyril, but Robert, as he cautiously emerged, was actually walked on by Mrs. Biddle, who kept the stall. Her large, solid foot stood firmly on the small, solid hand of Robert, and who can blame Robert if he did yell a little? A crowd instantly collected. Yells are very unusual at bazaars, and everyone was intensely interested. It was several seconds before the 3 free children could make Mrs. Biddle understand that what she was walking on was not a schoolroom floor, or even, as she presently supposed, a dropped pincushion, but the living hand of a suffering child. So she's still standing there on his hand. When she became aware that she really had hurt him, she grew very angry indeed. When people have hurt other people by accident, the one who does the hurting is always much the angriest. I wonder why. Probably because we feel guilty for having done it and we're trying to defend ourselves. Not a good response, but it happens. I'm so very sorry, I'm sure, said Mrs. Biddle, but she spoke more in anger than in sorrow. Come out. Whatever do you mean by creeping about under the stalls, like earwigs? We were looking at things in the corner. Such nasty, prying ways, said Mrs. Biddle, will never make you successful in life. There's nothing there but packing and dust. Oh, isn't there? Said Jane. That's all you know. Little girl, don't be rude, said Mrs. Biddle, flushing violet. In other words, she's starting to get really wound up. She doesn't mean to be, but there are some nice things there all the same, said Cyril, who suddenly felt how impossible it was to inform the listening crowd that all the treasures piled on the carpet were Mother's contributions to the bazaar. No one would believe it, and if they did and wrote to thank Mother, she would think, well, goodness only knew what she would think. The other 3 children felt the same. I should like to see them, said a very nice lady, whose friends had disappointed her, and who hoped that these might be belated contributions to her poorly furnished stall. She looked inquiringly at Robert, who said, with pleasure, don't mention it, and dived back under Mrs. Biddle's stall. I wonder you encourage such behaviour, said Mrs. Biddle. I always speak my mind, as you know, Miss Peasmarsh, and I must say I am surprised. She turned to the crowd. There is no entertainment here, she said sternly. A very naughty little boy has accidentally hurt himself, but only slightly. Will you please disperse? It will only encourage him in naughtiness if he finds himself the centre of attention. The crowd slowly dispersed. Anthea, speechless with fury, heard a nice curate say, poor little beggar, and loved the curate at once and forever. A curate is someone who works at the church. I can't remember the exact role, don't ask. Then Robert wriggled out from under the stall with some Benares brass and some inlaid sandalwood boxes. Liberty, cried Miss Peasmarsh. Then Charles has not forgotten after all. Excuse me, said Mrs. Biddle with fierce politeness. These objects are deposited behind my stall. Some unknown donor who does good by stealth and would blush if he could hear you claim the things. Of course they are for me. My stall touches yours at the corner, said poor Miss Peasmarsh timidly, and my cousin did promise. The children sidled away from the unequal contest and mingled with the crowd. Their feelings were too deep for words, till at last Robert said, That stiff-starched pig! And after all our trouble, I'm hoarse with gassing to that trousered lady in India, said Cyril. "The pig lady's very, very nasty," said Jane. It was Anthea who said in a hurried undertone, "She isn't very nice, and Miss Peasmarsh is pretty and nice too. Who's got a pencil?" It sounds like Anthea has a plan. Oh, it was a long crawl under 3 stalls, but Anthea did it. A large piece of pale blue paper lay among the rubbish in the corner. She folded it to a square and wrote upon it, licking the pencil at every word to make it mark quite blackly. Their pencils are a bit different to ours. Ours don't work quite the same way. "All these Indian things are for pretty, nice Miss Peasmarsh's stall." She thought of adding, "There is nothing for Mrs. Biddle," but she saw that this might lead to suspicion. So she wrote hastily, "From an unknown donor," which is written Donna, Donna, and crept back among the boards and trestles to join the others. So that when Mrs. Biddle appealed to the bazaar committee and the corner of the stall was lifted and shifted so that stout clergymen and heavy ladies could get to the corner without creeping under stalls, the blue paper was discovered. And all the splendid, shining Indian things were given over to Miss Peasmarsh, and she sold them all and got £35 for them. "I don't understand about that blue paper," said Mrs. Biddle. "It looks to me like the work of a lunatic, and saying you were nice and pretty. It's not the work of a sane person." Anthea and Jane begged Miss Peasmarsh to let them help her sell the things, because it was their brother who had announced the good news that the things had come. Miss Peasmarsh was very willing, for now her stall, that had been so neglected, was surrounded by people who wanted to buy, and she was glad to be helped. The children noted that Mrs. Biddle had not more to do in the way of selling than she could manage quite well. I hope they were not glad, for you should forgive your enemies, even if they walk on your hands, and then say it is all your naughty fault. But I am afraid they were not so sorry as they ought to have been. So Mrs. Biddle was busy, but not excessively busy. She could cope with it. It took some time to arrange the things on the stall. The carpet was spread over it, and the dark colours showed up the brass and silver and ivory things. It was a happy and busy afternoon, and when Miss Peasmarsh and the girls had sold every single one of the little pretty things from the Indian bazaar far, far away, Anthea and Jane went off with the boys to fish in the fish pond and dive into the bran pie and hear the cardboard band and the phonograph and the chorus of singing birds that was done behind a screen with glass tubes and glasses of water. So activities at the sort of sale place. Often also the sort of activities at an English gala day. Or what was the other thing I called it? Fete, F-E-T-E, with an accent, one of those arrowed accents over one of the E's. Fishing in the fish pond, that's where you have a stick with a string, and it often has, don't know if it's got a magnet on it. No, it's not a magnet because it's harder to catch. It's got a little wire fish hook on the end, and you try and hook things from the area that's designated as the fish pond, and that will be things like, I don't know, maybe a little toy soldier or a car or something like that. All that sort of stuff, maybe something to eat, I don't know. The bran pie is where you have, we would call it a lucky dip, but it was done in a different manner. So a lucky dip, when I was at school and we would go to the school gala day, a lucky dip would have wood shavings. In this case, they have bran, because bran is effectively, it's a waste material from processing wheat and things like that. There's always more produced than what most people need. And then in the sawdust, the wood shavings would be wrapped up in paper in little parcels, a bunch of little cheap toys. And you never quite knew what you were going to get. And sometimes there'd be one or two that were a bit nicer. Some of them were bigger than others, but that didn't necessarily reflect on their value. And it was always like, oh, wonder what I'm going to get in the lucky dip. And you paid a small coin to be able to pick something in the lucky dip. You weren't allowed to feel them to find out what they were. You just had to put your hand in and feel around in the sawdust until your hand connected with something well enough, and you'd pull it out, and that was yours, whatever it was that was wrapped up. actually, there's a children's story about someone finding something in a lucky dip. And it might have been a little book, and it had different writing on to the sort of things that were on everything else. I wish I could remember what that was, because I'd like to read that one to you. I'll have to see if I can find it. It was a lovely story. It's probably something that everyone knows. I don't know. I'm going to write that down. That's the other thing, is sometimes I suggest that you bring along pencil and paper so you can write down things for whatever you need to figure out later when you're not in the middle of listening to a story. So, story, book, with a question mark, lucky dip, hopefully that will remind me enough, and also I'll be able to remember enough details to be able to do a search on Google to find out what it was, and maybe it's a story that's appropriate to tell you guys. We will find out, maybe. Anyway, let's carry on with the story. So that's the bran pie. So it would probably be like a wash basin, like this deep and wide, sort of, or that sort of a shape for them to call it a pie, filled with bran, and then inside it all these little things that you could have a fish for with your hand to see if you can get them. Cardboard band would be a bunch of people making noise with cardboard and paper type instruments, a tube that you're tooting down to be a trumpet and all that sort of stuff. A lot of fun. And the phonograph, that's a record player. These days, no, not even these days, a while back it would have been a CD player. Before that it would have been a tape recorder, tape deck. These days it's MP3s, or even if you're going to be a lot more online and modern, you could say it was listening to something on Spotify. But there they would have had a record that was put, a disc or a cylinder, depending on the type of phonograph, put onto the player and then playing. I'm not sure if these ones would have had a horn to produce the sound, but they probably did. And the chorus of singing birds that was done behind a screen with glass tubes and glasses of water. It's like that sort of sound is produced by making something that's a little bit like a whistle, but made out of glass. I've actually seen them done as a plastic thing. And then the end of it is put into water, and it's by blowing the whistle end and the air putting pressure on the water that it makes the water move in the pipe, and it changes it so it makes a wobbly trilling sort of a sound, a bit like a bird. So it's all entertainments put on for everybody. They had a beautiful tea suddenly presented to them by the nice curate, and Miss Peasmarsh joined them before they had had more than 3 cakes each. It was a merry party, and the curate was extremely pleasant to everyone, even to Miss Peasmarsh, as Jane said afterwards. "We ought to get back to the stall," said Anthea, when no one could possibly eat anything more, and the curate was talking in a low voice to Miss Peasmarsh about after Easter. "There's nothing to go back for," said Miss Peasmarsh gaily. "Thanks to you, dear children, we've sold everything." There's the carpet," said Cyril. "Oh," said Miss Peasmarsh radiantly, "don't bother about the carpet. I've sold even that. Mrs. Biddle gave me 10 shillings for it. She said it would do for her servant's bedroom." "Why," said Jane, "her servants don't have carpets. We had cook from her, and she told us so." "No scandal about Queen Elizabeth, if you please," said the curate cheerfully. In other words, no gossiping. And Miss Peasmarsh laughed and looked at him as though she had never dreamt that anyone could be so amusing. Church of England, so they don't have to stay unmarried. But the others were struck dumb. How could they say the carpet is ours? For who brings carpets to bazaars? The children were now thoroughly wretched. But I am glad to say that their wretchedness did not make them forget their manners, as it does sometimes even with grown-up people. And I have a feeling I forgot to show... Oh, I did. I forgot to show you this picture. "Excuse me," said Mrs. Biddle, with fierce politeness. The things are deposited behind my stall. So there you go. Maybe I should line up the next picture just in case there's another one before we get to the end of this chapter. Sorry about that. Here we go. And I shall turn that off just for now, and then we'll wait till we get to that part of the story. There you go. How could they? For who brings carpets to bazaars? Apart from ones that are going to be sold. The children were now thoroughly wretched, but I am glad to say that their wretchedness did not make them forget their manners, as it does sometimes even with grown-up people who ought to know ever so much better. They said, "Thank you very much for the jolly tea, and thanks for being so jolly, and thanks awfully for giving us such a jolly time," for the curate had stood the fish ponds and bran pies and phonographs in the chorus of singing birds, and had stood them like a man, meaning he had paid for them to be able to do those things, because a bazaar is a fundraiser, and so you pay for all those activities. And so that's how they had done it. I think the curate's a bit sweet on Miss Peasmarsh, and this was a good excuse to actually be able to have a little bit more to do with her. Sorry, itchy. And the girls hugged Miss Peasmarsh, and as they went away they heard the curate say, "Jolly little kids, yes, but what about, you will let it be directly after Easter? Ah, do say you will." And Jane ran back and said, before Anthea could drag her away, "What are you going to do after Easter?" Nosy little girl. Miss Peasmarsh smiled and looked very pretty indeed, and the curate said, "I hope I am going to take a trip to the Fortunate Islands." "I wish we could take you on the wishing carpet," said Jane. "Thank you," said the curate, "but I am afraid I can't wait for that. I must go to the Fortunate Islands before they make me a bishop. I should have no time afterwards." "I've always thought I should marry a bishop," said Jane. "His aprons would come in so useful. Wouldn't you like to marry a bishop, Miss Peasmarsh?" It was then that they dragged her away. Fortunate Islands might be a euphemism for getting married, or something similar. We'll see. As it was Robert's hand that Mrs. Biddle had walked on, it was decided that he had better not recall the incident to her mind, and so make her angry again. Anthea and Jane had helped to sell things at the rival stall, so they were not likely to be popular. A hasty council of four decided that Mrs. Biddle would hate Cyril less than she would hate the others, so the others mingled with the crowd, and it was he who said to her, "Mrs. Biddle, we meant to have that carpet. Would you sell it to us? We could give you—" "Certainly not," said Mrs. Biddle. "Go away, little boy." Obviously she's not into children. There was that in her tone which showed Cyril all too plainly the hopelessness of persuasion. He found the others and said, "It's no use. She's like a lioness robbed of its puppies. We must watch where it goes, and, Anthea, I don't care what you say, it's our own carpet. It wouldn't be burglary. It would be a sort of forlorn hope rescue party, heroic and daring and dashing and not wrong at all." The children still wandered among the gay crowd, but there was no pleasure there for them any more. The chorus of singing birds sounded just like glass tubes being blown through water, and the phonograph simply made a horrid noise so that you could hardly hear yourself speak. And the people were buying things they couldn't possibly want, and it all seemed very stupid. And Mrs. Biddle had bought the wishing carpet for 10 shillings, and the whole of life was sad and grey and dusty, and smelt of slight gas escapes, and hot people, and cake, and crumbs, and all the children were very tired indeed. They found a corner within sight of the carpet, and there they waited miserably till it was far beyond their proper bedtime. And when it was 10, the people who had bought things went away, but the people who had been selling stayed to count up their money. "And to jaw about it," that means talk, said Robert. "I'll never go to another bazaar as long as I live. My hand is swollen as big as a pudding. I expect the nails in her horrible boots were poisoned." Just then someone who seemed to have a right to interfere said, "Everything is over now, you had better go home." So they went, and then they waited on the pavement under the gas lamp, where ragged children had been standing all the evening to listen to the band, and their feet slipped about in the greasy mud till Mrs. Biddle came out and was driven away in a cab with the many things she hadn't sold and the few things she had bought, among others the carpet. The other stall holders left their things in the school till Monday morning, but Mrs. Biddle was afraid someone would steal some of them, so she took them in a cab. The children, now too desperate to care for mud or appearances, hung on behind the cab till it reached Mrs. Biddle's house, so they'd hitched a ride on the back of it. When she and the carpet had gone in and the door was shut, Anthea said, "Don't let's burgle, do daring and dashing rescue acts, till we've given her a chance. Let's ring and ask to see her." The others hated to do this, but at last they agreed, on condition that Anthea would not make any silly fuss about the burglary afterwards, if it really came to that. So they knocked and rang, and a scared-looking parlour-maid opened the front door. While they were asking for Mrs. Biddle, they saw her. She was in the dining room, and she had already pushed back the table and spread out the carpet to see how it looked on the floor. "I knew she didn't want it for her servant's bedroom," Jane muttered. Anthea walked straight past the uncomfortable parlour-maid, and the others followed her. Mrs. Biddle had her back to them. Sorry, I accidentally tapped the screen and it turned a page. Mrs. Biddle had her back to them and was smoothing down the carpet with the same boot that had trampled on the hand of Robert, so that they were all in the room, and Cyril, with great presence of mind, had shut the door before she saw them. "Who is it, Jane?" she said in a sour voice, and then turning suddenly she saw who it was. Once more her face grew violet, a deep, dark violet. That's a type of purple. "You wicked, daring little things," she cried. "How dare you come here? At this time of night, too. Be off, or I'll send for the police." "Don't be angry," said Anthea soothingly. "We only wanted to ask you to let us have the carpet. We have quite 12 shillings between us, and—" "How dare you!" cried Mrs. Biddle, and her voice shook with angriness. "You do look horrid," said Jane suddenly. Mrs. Biddle actually stamped that booted foot of hers. "You rude, barefaced child," she said. Anthea almost shook Jane, but Jane pushed forward in spite of her. "It really is our nursery carpet," she said. "You ask anyone if it isn't." "Let's wish ourselves home," said Cyril in a whisper. "No go," Robert whispered back. "She'd be there too, raving mad as likely as not. Horrid thing. I hate her." So Cyril had thought about the fact that if they're standing on the carpet, they could wish themselves home, except that so's she. There you go. "I wish Mrs. Biddle was in an angelic good temper," cried Anthea suddenly. "It's worth trying," she said to herself. Mrs. Biddle's face grew from purple to violet, and from violet to mauve, and from mauve to pink, and then she smiled quite a jolly smile. "Why, so I am," she said. "What a funny idea." "Why shouldn't I be in a good temper, my dears?" Once more the carpet had done its work, and not on Mrs. Biddle alone. The children felt suddenly good and happy. "You're a jolly good sort," said Cyril. "I see that now. I'm so sorry we vexed you at the bazaar today." "Not another word," said the changed Mrs. Biddle. "Of course you shall have the carpet, my dears, if you've taken such a fancy to it." No, I wouldn't have more than the 10 shillings I paid." "It does seem hard to ask you for it after you bought it at the bazaar," said Anthea, "but it really is our nursery carpet. It got to the bazaar by mistake with some other things." "Did it really? How vexing," said Mrs. Biddle kindly. "Well, my dears, I can very well give the extra 10 shillings, so you take your carpet, and we'll say no more about it. Have a piece of cake before you go." "I'm so sorry I stepped on your hand, my boy. Is it all right now?" "Yes, thank you," said Robert. "I say, you are good." "Not at all," said Mrs. Biddle heartily. "I'm delighted to be able to give any pleasure to you dear children." And she helped them roll up the carpet, and the boys carried it away between them. "You are a dear," said Anthea, and she and Mrs. Biddle kissed each other heartily. "Well," said Cyril as they went along the street. "Yes," said Robert, "and the odd part is—" Hang on, I'll just give you the picture. As they're going along the street, the boys carried it between them. There's the damp street, there's a policeman, and then the boys have the carpet, one underneath Cyril's arm and over Robert's shoulder. I think Robert's the older one, I'm not sure. No, it is under his arm actually, there's his arm tucked in there. And then there's the 2 girls following along behind. Not quite your usual sort of Saturday night thing. And the odd part is that you feel just as if it was real, her being so jolly, and not only the carpet making her nice. Perhaps it is real, said Anthea, only it was covered up with crossness and tiredness and things, and the carpet took them away. I hope it'll keep them away, said Jane. She isn't ugly at all when she laughs. The carpet has done many wonders in its day. But the case of Mrs. Biddle is, I think, the most wonderful. From that day she was never anything like so disagreeable as she was before, and she sent a lovely silver teapot and a kind letter to Miss Peasmarsh when the pretty lady married the nice curate, just after Easter as it was, and they went to Italy for their honeymoon. And that's the end of the chapter. And I'm not reading the next one because it's even longer. I know, it's only just after 4 o'clock. Maybe we can have a chat. I can have some coffee and some bickies. It's biscuits, which is what Americans call cookies, except they're not, they're biscuits. So how are you and what have you been up to? Have you been doing anything particularly interesting? Lots of fun? Sorry, I am still looking at my other monitor, just keeping an eye on things. That's all right, okay over there, that's good. Have you been doing anything particularly interesting? Did I tell you? Yes, I'm pretty sure I did. I told you at the beginning that I've managed to get it so that my one of the plugins for my Discord server now actually tells Discord, my Discord server, when I go live on Twitch, and so therefore it's announced for me. I've been wanting to do that for a while, but the thing I was going to use for it, the part that I normally use for other things is still free, but the part that does that, you have to pay a fee for. And I don't make any money off doing this, and so I can't really afford to do that. But there are other ones that are free, so I'm using one of those. I found one that seems to, so far, have worked okay. I just need to learn a little bit more about how the rest of it works. A lot more technical stuff. And taking photos. Oh yeah, I told you about the photos that I took, and they weren't as focused as I thought they were. And then when I had another look at them, I realized that the camera was focusing on the wall in the background. Oh dear, I've got to change the focal setting on the camera on my phone. It takes lovely photos. I just didn't set it up right. Oh well, that's the way things go. Now, so the next story that we will have, I'm not reading it to you now, but I'm just going to tell you what it is. Sorry, hiccup. The next chapter is called The Temple. I wonder what that one's all about. Interesting. What else? Is there anything else particularly interesting going on at the moment? We've got a lot of wind at the moment. We had rain in the middle of the night, and it's still summer. Actually, no, technically it's autumn here in New Zealand. I'm going to have a quick look and see if I can see what the next picture is. Get it all ready for the next thing. It's not one that we need yet because it involves the stairs in the house or a building, something. What else is going on? That is not controversial, that is not going to make us all stressed. That's the sort of what else is going on. We had Grandpappy up for dinner last night. He came and had dinner with us. That's my dad, my children's grandfather, one of their grandfathers. My mum is in a rest home hospital at the moment to give him a little bit of a holiday. Because he looks after her. She's not able to do anything for herself anymore. And so that was lovely having him up for dinner, and we had a lovely dinner of very, very simple, just cooked minced beef and boiled new potatoes with butter and peas, green peas from the freezer. And it was very, very, very yum. Very, very, very yum. There you go. There's your ASMR for today. I've been having a little bit of an explore of the categories on Twitch. Now, if you're over on YouTube, none of this will make any sense to you because it doesn't affect you at all. If you want to interact with me when I'm reading a story, then go to my Twitch channel, join Twitch, it's free to join. Go to my Twitch channel and follow me, and Twitch will tell you when I'm live, and then you can actually type in the chat box and I can respond to you, okay? So this is if you're on YouTube. If you're here on Twitch already, you already know about all that sort of stuff, but it's a good idea to follow me because that way you know when I go live. And also it means that you can clip things, which means that you get Twitch to save a little snippet of the video. So when I do something absolutely stupid, you can clip it and then save it so everyone else can have a good laugh too, and I'll have a good laugh as well. That can be quite a lot of fun. I get so busy with reading I don't think about clips, but that's okay. Some of you are brilliant at doing clipping. I know that. I've seen some of the clips you've done, and you title them really well too. And I was going to say something about Twitch. Something else about Twitch. What was it? Go back to YouTube. I was telling people on YouTube. No, I was telling people on Twitch because people on YouTube can't do that. I don't know. I can't remember what it was. No. I'm guessing that YouTube will auto caption my reading. I don't know. I've got it so Twitch does it for me. And if you don't like captions, that's right, you can turn them off. Easy enough to do. Weather, I've talked about the weather. Twitch, I've got things working on Twitch. There was something to do with being on Twitch I was going to tell you. It was specific. No? I added in the bit about you don't forget you can clip things. That's cool. Those of you who are going back over the story, there's one which is not the standard VOD, which is the video on demand recording from when I was reading. It will look slightly different in the way Twitch shows it to you in my list of videos because I had to upload it. Not last time, but I think the time before, I'm not sure. When I was reading, our internet connection decided it was going to be really strange, and so Twitch restarted the stream a couple of times, but it ended up splitting it, so it had 2 video sections and nothing in the middle, I think, timing wise. When I added up how long I had been reading for, it was a lot longer than what the 2 videos added together were. So rather than fluff around with that, I took the saved recording that my computer saves when I'm actually talking to you, and then uploaded that to Twitch so you can actually still see that. So if it looks slightly different, if it doesn't have tags on, that's okay. I've just remembered. If it doesn't have tags on, it's all right. You know who I am. You know what sort of stuff I do. And what I was going to say to you, that I was going to tell you Twitch people about, was I've been looking at different categories. So at the moment, the general category that I use is just chatting, and then the subsection of it, if I was gaming, it would be the name of the game. Because I don't game, because I do reading, I have to try and find a category that is an existing one to be able to publish my videos as part of. And so at the moment, it's reading aloud. Some people get confused because reading aloud is also used as a tag for when people are playing a game and it's got a text box in it, either they or their computer will read the text box out loud to people. And so they will tag their game as reading aloud. And so there's a lot of things that come under reading aloud, and most of them aren't story reading. There are 2 other sections, and I can't remember what they're under, if they're under just chatting or something else. One is called books, but written all in capital letters. And then the other one is called reading fun. When I first saw them, I thought they were the name of actual games, like I can't remember now. There used to be a kids game that was called Read a Rabbit, like that sort of thing. I thought it was that sort of thing because of the way it was written. They don't have very many people who follow those channels, and there are very, very few people who actually publish under that tag. So I'm debating whether or not I switch to calling my reading a books or a reading fun section, as opposed to using the reading aloud tag under just chatting. I don't know. And somebody else suggested ASMR, which is people like the sound of voices talking, things like that, can give you goosebumps. That's what ASMR is. Getting goosebumps from things that we hear. And there are people who will just talk and others get goosebumps from it, and so they will specifically do it as ASMR. But there's a whole lot of other stuff that's a little bit weird in that section of Twitch, and I don't particularly want to have people who are looking for family friendly stories to have to wade through all of those things to find my family friendly story, because some of those things are not very family friendly. I'm sorry. Anyway, so that's the other thing I've been thinking about. What are your thoughts on it? Don't bother writing them in the chat box on Twitch, because once I go offline, I won't see that. It will not show it to me afterwards. But join the Discord server. I'll give you the link if you don't already know it, which you should do. And also it's down below in my profile. And if you're on YouTube, go to my Twitch channel and it will show you my Discord link. I don't put it up on YouTube just because there's so much more traffic over there, and there's not quite the same way of being able to monitor it. So you're welcome to join the Discord server and give me your opinion on what you think. What category should we be under? Should we be ASMR? Should we be reading aloud? Should we be books? Because my category at the moment is actually just chatting with the tag reading aloud. But category-wise, I could do books or I could do reading fun, both of which only have like 300 people who follow it, as opposed to thousands and thousands and thousands who follow just chatting, because it's the biggest category. ASMR, or staying as we are with just chatting with having a tag for reading aloud. I really do want your opinion on that. And if you're on YouTube and you're wondering about that and you have an opinion on it, you can type it in the comments section down below the video. Please do. And don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you're watching this on YouTube. Those of you who want more stories, maybe you want the story that came before The Phoenix and the Carpet, which is called 5 Children in It. You can have a listen to, watch, if you want to have your eyes open, to those in the appropriate playlists over on YouTube. Now, I've just given you, if you're watching on Twitch, I've given you the link to my YouTube channel. If you go over to YouTube, another thing that's free, you can join if you haven't already joined YouTube, and then subscribe to my channel. And if you click on the bell icon, it will tell you every time I put a new video up. And I put them up on the same day that I do my reading here, but 2 weeks later. So the videos that I have here go over to YouTube and they're put into playlists there. And the playlists are per book, except for a couple of the ones like Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass are 2 different books, but they're in one playlist. And then all of the Millie Molly Mandy stories are in one playlist. It's a really long playlist. The stories are really short. Anyway, so that way you can get some more story time in, even when I'm not reading. So you've got lots of things you can go and do. You can join my Discord server. You can subscribe and ring the bell and like over on YouTube. If you're already over there, then that's cool. And if you've just randomly come across me here on Twitch, please follow me and we'll have some fun. Okay? And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, because for me it's the weekend coming up. Whatever it is for you, that doesn't matter. I hope you have a wonderful time between now and when we next meet. Happy reading. Thank you for being here. Bye.